With Season 3 now complete, it's time to rank every single episode from worst to best. These are always really difficult because rankings are so subjective. What I like one week could drastically change the next, and Season 3 just makes things harder because it has so many damn good episodes. Now, like with previous seasons, don't take things personally if your favorite episode isn't where you would put it. This is just my opinion, and I am definitely not an authority on the subject. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get this party started. While I don't really think any of the episodes are bad, Teso dos Bichos is definitely the worst. What starts fairly interesting with the Jaguar spirit really falls apart at the end when the agents are being attacked by average, everyday house cats. I'm not really sure what the hell Chris Carter was thinking. Even director Kim Manners was befuddled by the decision and asked why he couldn't just use the Jaguar spirit shown in the beginning of the episode. I like the whole disturbing ancient shaman remains and the curse that doing something like that would bring, but it's not handled the best here. The episode could have used a few more rewrites to tighten the whole thing up. But I don't care how many passes you do with the script, you can't start the episode with a jaguar and then end with a pussycat. At least Scully being attacked by a rod puppet was funny. The Walk is a fairly depressing episode about a man that murders those that sent him to war, only to come back a quadruple amputee. While not a bad episode, it's fairly middling. There's some good imagery. I especially love the special effects used to show his out-of-body specter at the end, and the shot in the pool while he attacks the captain. That scene in particular I have always found to be really creepy and has caused many issues for me when swimming alone in a pool. Even though Rappo was supposed to be the bad guy in this, I always felt him to be somewhat sympathetic. Obviously, murdering a child and mother who had nothing to do with what happened to you is a pretty awful thing, but I can kind of understand why he feels the way he does towards his superiors. Still though, it doesn't excuse what he did. A decent episode overall, I think, but it's a little on the darker side. The List is another decent episode, but the problem with it is it's a tad confusing. The episode is about a man, Nietzsche Manley, who after being executed for his involvement in a botched robbery, comes back from the dead to take revenge on everyone, from the executioner to the lawyer who failed him. There really isn't anyone likable in the episode. The inmates are all unlikable, the warden and his men are especially unlikable, and by the end nothing is really solved. Nietzsche manages to kill everyone on his list, and that's that. If you remove Mulder and Scully from the episode, it almost plays out exactly the same. There's a little interesting bit with one of the correctional officers, Vincent Parmelli, played by Ken Foree, and his relationship with Nietzsche's wife, but I don't think it was explored enough. I always love a good revenge from beyond the grave type story, and this one does an okay job of it, but it could have been better.
Hell. Guard!
Revelations is a faith-heavy, Scully-focused episode that I think is a good enough watch. It basically places Scully in the role of protecting a very special child who, if he dies, could bring about Armageddon. Thinking about it, it feels kind of like Terminator. You have one character trying to protect someone very important from an impending threat in order to prevent the end of the world. This is the first episode that really dives into Scully's beliefs, and I enjoy getting to know more about her. What annoys me with this episode is how quickly Mulder can become a non-believer. Are religious faiths and beliefs in the paranormal really all that different? I'm not looking to start a debate, but what I'm saying is for someone who is so open-minded, how can he suddenly scoff at Scully when she's seeing things that aren't meant for him? But I guess that is payback for Scully questioning Mulder in every other episode, but still it always sticks out to me. The other thing I enjoy is seeing Michael Berryman playing something other than some inbred monster that likes to attack families out in the desert. Overall, a decent episode, and I like when Scully becomes the center of attention. Alright, we go from a Scully-focused episode to a Skinner-focused episode. Avatar places Skinner in the midst of a murder investigation after a woman he met at a bar winds up dead in his bed. This one, like Revelations, was basically an excuse to give the audience more of Skinner's backstory or who he is as a person. We meet his wife, who up to this point we didn't even know he was married, and learn more about his time in Vietnam. I like Avatar, but it feels very much like a filler episode. There isn't a whole lot that really happens. There's some spooky old woman who likes to appear at the worst possible times, but was she a succubus like Mulder said, or was she a guardian angel? She only seemed to come around in Skinner's life when he was going through traumatic experiences, so I'm guessing more guardian angel. The entire episode basically boils down to a plot of framing Skinner for murdering a prostitute, which he didn't know was a prostitute, and getting him kicked out of the FBI. Also, we never see his wife again. They're in the middle of getting a divorce, and as quickly as she came, poof, she's gone. And how the hell did they manage to turn the prostitute's head all the way around without waking Skinner up? How money brings Mulder and Scully to the underbelly of San Francisco's Chinatown, where a lottery is being held that can cost you a little more than an arm or a leg. What I like about this episode is the change in scenery. I've always enjoyed when the agents would investigate a myth or legend from another culture, and this one does a pretty good job. I wish they had done this a little bit more because there are some really cool legends around the world, but logistically, I can understand why it wasn't exactly feasible. This episode has a great cast with B.D. Wong, Lucy Liu, Michael Yama, and the legend that is James Hong. But even with all that talent, the episode still suffers because there really isn't an X-File present. The lottery is interesting, but the entire thing feels like it could be from any ordinary cop drama. And again, like The List, if you take Mulder and Scully out of the equation, nothing would have really changed. I think the lottery would still be going on if they hadn't intervened because they were putting pressure on Detective Chow, forcing him to be involved. But I feel like he would have had a change of heart at some point anyways and put a stop to it. Still, I enjoy the atmosphere of the episode all around, and it's always fun to see Lo Pan. Wet Wired is a better version of the Season 2 episode Blood. It takes the same basic concepts of fear and paranoia, but at the very least gives us, the audience, some kind of explanation as to just what the hell is going on. The episode has the agents investigating a series of murders and a strange device that is causing people to experience their greatest fears. My favorite part is how it affects Scully and just how far off the deep end she goes. I mean, she nearly takes Mulder out twice, and Mulder being Mulder still has time to laugh it off. There's lots of good stuff in this one, but Jillian's performance really is the best part. Seeing her reaction as she believes Mulder is handing cigarette smoking man a tape is pretty great. I think once the Scully stuff is over though, the episode kinda takes a downward turn. I'm not saying it's bad, it's just not as good. The reveal showing X and cigarette smoking man at the very end is another highlight, and something that was very shocking for first-time watchers back in the day. Oubliette is an often forgotten or overlooked episode, but I think it's fairly dark and disturbing. The episode follows a woman with a dark past and her connection to a young girl who becomes the victim of a child predator. The material is a lot darker than most X-Files episodes and isn't so much about the paranormal as it is the darker side of humanity. Tracy Ellis does a good job as Lucy, the woman who has a telepathic connection to the young kidnapped girl, and what we learn about her past is just really sad. One of the biggest takeaways is how caring and sympathetic Mulder is to the entire situation, but at the same time Scully comes off as a huge bitch. I get it, she doesn't believe the telepathic connection or whatever it is, but it's quite obvious Lucy was a victim and not involved in any way with the young girl's abduction. Unlike some episodes, there are no laughs here. The scenes with young Amy in the cellar as Wade takes pictures of her just make your skin crawl. The entire thing ends in such a heartbreaking manner too. There really isn't a happy ending to this story. A solid entry that I think most people should go back and rewatch.
Who are you? What do you want?
Syzygy is a fun and chaotic episode. It follows the agents as they travel to a small town where murders are occurring and all the residents think it's the work of the devil. There's a lot of fun and silly moments throughout, with one of the standouts being the phrase "sure, fine, whatever," which has basically become one of the most well-known lines in the show's history. Scully's interactions and jealousy with Detective White are all funny as well. And who can't forget the brief cameo of Canada's very own Bryan Adams. I love Summer of '69, sir. The story as a whole is a little wonky, but has something to do with astrology and two girls being born on the same day, which causes everyone to go crazy and act completely out of character. I'm not sure how all that makes guns fire on their own, but it sure did.
If it's not too big a deal, maybe you can get me a few photographs of that thing which bears absolutely no resemblance to a horned beast.
Sure, fine. Whatever.
Another underrated and often overlooked episode, Grotesque places Mulder and Scully in a murder investigation involving a man who says he was possessed by a demon, except once he's been arrested, the murders continue. Another darker episode that is a lot more psychological than anything. Kurtwood Smith does a great job as Agent Bill Patterson, an FBI agent who doesn't really understand Mulder's ways, but subconsciously brings him on the case to help solve it. The episode is really more about how spending your life day after day getting inside the head of a killer can affect you mentally, and how the deeper you go, the less likely it is that you'll be able to return. Throughout the episode, you do see brief glimpses of said demon, but is that just what Mulder wants to see because he's getting too close to the mind of the killer? There are also a lot of really cool drawings of the demon and clay gargoyles that really set the tone of the story. This is the kind of episode that I have to be in the right frame of mind for. It's not something I can usually just throw on if I want something mindless to watch. But if you have not seen this one in some time, I recommend going back and checking it out. Talitha Cumi is a good season finale, but for me is the weakest of the Mythology episodes of season 3. The one problem I have is that it feels very familiar to what has come before. I love me some Bounty Hunter, don't get me wrong, but we've seen him a fair amount so far. I like the new character Jeremiah Smith, and it'll be interesting to see where that takes us in season 4. For me, the most interesting aspect of this episode is the interaction between Cigarette Smoking Man and Tina Mulder. There's clearly some history between the two, but just how deep that history goes, we don't know yet. I also question X and where his allegiance is. After he and Mulder fight, he tells Mulder he's a dead man. There's some good dialogue scenes between CSM and Jeremiah that you need to pay attention to, but like I said, there's nothing really mind-blowing for me when it comes to this episode. I know many will disagree with this being so high, but I actually really like this episode. For one, you get a young Jack Black before he was Jack Black, and Giovanni Ribisi is kind of sympathetic in a way. Look, using lightning powers to force your teacher to be with you probably isn't the best way to go about attracting a woman. But from his home life and everything around him, I almost feel like if his character had a better support system, he would likely not be doing what he does. Ultimately, this episode just boils down to what would happen if the average Redditor got lightning powers and was forced to go outside. One thing I forgot to mention about this episode in my video on it was the soundtrack. The music in this episode really is a standout, and even though I may not be a fan, it really adds something special to it. I've heard stories of streaming services removing music from TV shows and movies because they don't want to pay for the rights to that music, and that would be a shame if it were to happen to this episode, because you'd be ripping out half of what makes it stand out. For the season 3 premiere, The Blessing Way picks up where Anasazi left off, with a presumably dead Mulder and a tape that may have government secrets on alien life. There's a lot going on in this one. You've got Mulder recovering with Albert Hosting and his family, Scully finding a metal implant in her neck, and Melissa being shot by Luis Cardinal. For a Mythology episode, it's pretty strong. Gillian does a good job playing a distressed Scully who thinks Mulder is dead, and the reveal of the implant is also pretty scary because if you know the series, then you know where that's leading. The ending of the episode when Scully confronts Skinner because she thinks he's there to assassinate her is also really tense and leaves the episode on a great cliffhanger that in my opinion leads into an even better second half. Paperclip continues where Blessing Way ends off, with the standoff between Scully and Skinner. The beginning is very tense, and things only get more interesting when Mulder returns and Skinner shows them he has the tape. One of the highlights of the episode for me is at the mine, where the agents discover all the records of the smallpox vaccinations, and Scully even comes into contact with a bunch of aliens before they run off and board their ship. I would love to see Scully try and explain what she thinks those aliens are. The best part has to be when Skinner puts CSM in his place by revealing Albert Hosteen has memorized all the information on the tape and shared it with 20 other Navajo men across the country. It's such a fuck you moment to Cigarette Smoking Man and always gets me hyped. Paperclip is a solid episode, but for me is just outside of the top 10.
This is where you pucker up and kiss my ass.
Now listen,
You listen to me, you son of a bitch!
The first part of the two-parter starts off really interestingly when Mulder buys a tape that apparently shows an alien autopsy, which of course drives him off the deep end and into something he probably wasn't supposed to see. There's a lot of solid moments in this one. I love when Mulder gets his ass kicked by the Japanese man and loses his gun, only to pull out another smaller gun simply because fans online were getting annoyed that he was always being disarmed. The heartbreaking scenes of Scully meeting all the women that have been abducted in the past is also a standout moment of the episode because it gives Scully and the audience a glimpse into what could be her future. I like the use of real-life events like the mention of Unit 731 and combining it with the more fantastical elements of the show. I'm wondering if it isn't somewhat in bad taste. And of course, Nisei ends in a great cliffhanger with Mulder jumping on top of a train because it may contain an alien-human hybrid. A very good mythology episode with a better follow-up.
It's not your usual brand of entertainment.
According to the magazine ad I answered, it's an alien autopsy.
731 continues where Nisei left off, with Mulder now aboard the train and Scully trying to warn him that it's rigged with a bomb. There are two things that I like about this episode. First, the bomb on the train. Most mythology episodes kind of follow a similar formula, but here at least half of the episode takes place in the cramped confines of a train car that is rigged to explode. Adding the bomb to the mix really adds a sense of urgency and frenetic pace to the episode. The second thing I really like is Stephen McHattie as the red-haired man. He claims to be part of the NSA, but it's the X-Files. You know, trust no one. He plays his role really well, and it's a shame he's only in 2 episodes, because I feel like he would have made for a good reoccurring character like Krychek. Still though, a very good episode, and it's nice to see X actively save someone instead of just solving everything with bullets.
There's something on this train, but it's not a bomb. Throw that here.
As far as monsters go in the X-Files, I have Virgil and Canto from Too Shy up there with some of the show's heaviest of hitters. Too Shy features a fat-sucking vampire, Scully's words, not mine, as he targets lonely women on the internet so he can drain them of their fat. On the whole, the episode is basically about the dangers of meeting people online, which at the time was just starting to become popular. You have to remember, during the mid-90s, not a lot of people had the internet, and it was only just starting to pick up steam. Timothy Carhart does a good job as Encanto and is very creepy. He seems to have a way with words and manages to snag some victims, including his landlord, who was willing to give up everything, including her daughter, for a little bit of action. The episode is a tight, to-the-point Monster of the Week story that is often overlooked. Encanto might not be as creepy as Toombs or as terrifying as Donnie Pfaster, but he's not too far behind. Piper Maru is the first of a 2-parter and introduces us to the Black Oil, something that will shape the story of the X-Files going forward. I remember first seeing this episode and the oil in the eyes always terrified me as a kid. There's also a bit with Scully pressing on about her sister's death, which leads to a shocking moment when Skinner is shot by the same man who killed Scully's sister. The fighter plane that the French salvage crew discovers is always a really cool visual, and that ending with Krychek shown as being taken over by the Black Oil was always a perfect cliffhanger. The entire thing made you wonder what was going to happen next. Will Mulder be the Oil's next victim? Is Skinner going to die? Anything and everything is possible with the X-Files. More of of the Coprophages is like a non-episode, because by the end of it, nothing really happened. The cockroaches throughout just happened to be present when people died, and the alternative fuel researcher, who seemed to be responsible for bringing the cockroaches in the first place, ends up blowing himself to smithereens because of his fear of the tiny insects. There really isn't anything X-Files about the episode, besides the robotic cockroaches, which are never fully explained, and could either be cameras sent by the government to spy, or from an alien civilization. Either are equally as plausible. Still though, I love this episode. It's all about the character moments. Mulder constantly calling Scully for help, and Scully not really caring. Well, that is until Mulder meets another woman, and Scully has a sudden urge to come down and help him out. The entire episode was loosely based on the hysteria that was caused by the War of the Worlds radio drama from 1938, and it definitely shows. A very fun episode, and as you're going to notice, I might be a Darren Morgan fanboy.
Their theory is that UFOs are actually nocturnal insect swarms passing through electrical airfields.
Her name is Bambi?
You know, I've said this is underrated and that is overlooked, but Pusher really is overlooked. Now honestly, X-Files fans know this is a good episode, but anyone new to this series really needs to check this one out. The episode follows a man, Robert Modell, who has the ability to kill people simply through sheer will. He can seriously talk you into walking into oncoming traffic, and even though he killed you, it looks like a suicide, so there's nothing anyone can charge him with. The episode is great, but picks up in the second half when it becomes more of a cat and mouse game between Modell and Mulder. The ending sequence alone is one of the best things the X-Files has ever done, and that first time watching it was one of the most tense television viewings I have ever had. They really knocked this one out of the park, and I couldn't see it being anywhere but in my top 5.
One pull to trigger against me. 1 in 6 chance.
Quagmire is another light fun episode with one of the biggest downer moments in the series. Yes, I'm talking about the death of Queequeg. Oh, that little rapscallion, always getting into trouble, but maybe if his owner was a little more responsible, he'd still be here with us. Besides Queequeg's death, the only thing I never really liked was the lake monster turning out to just be an alligator. I'd always wished it had been an actual lake monster, but I understand the logistics of doing that may have been more costly or time consuming than what the show can afford. There were a lot of fun moments sprinkled throughout the episode, and even some nods to Darren Morgan's War of the Coprophages. This was mostly due in part because even though he wasn't the writer, Darren had his mitts all over this thing. The part that seems to get the highest praise is the conversation between Mulder and Scully while they're stranded on the rock. It's a great scene and definitely gives us more insight into our two leads. This episode is definitely one of my go-tos and one of my favorite episodes of this series.
Oh, tell me you're not serious.
Apocrypha is one of my favorite mythology-based episodes. I've said this a million times, but I always go for Monster of the Week stories over mythology, but there's some solid stuff in this one. My favorite part is when Scully finds her sister's killer. She may be 5'3" and 110 pounds, but she is feisty and will f*** you up. I just wish she had actually pulled the trigger, because Luis really deserved it. We also see Skinner survived his shot, Mulder made it back from Hong Kong with Krychek nearly in one piece, and the lone gunmen are back to their usual shenanigans. This episode also has one of the grossest moments when the black oil leaves Krychek's body. I don't know what it is, but it just looks so nasty, and I actually kind of feel bad for Krychek, who seems to be everyone's whipping boy.
Are you the man that shot my sister?
Please don't kill me.
You shot my sister!
Please, I can tell you.
Tell me!
Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose is often cited as being the best episode in the series. Go to any top 10 video and it's somewhere near the top, if not at the top. The story follows Clyde Bruckman, a psychic who can see how people are going to die, and a serial killer who can see him. Peter Boyle is the standout of the episode as Clyde Bruckman. He brings a humorous yet sad nature to the character, a life insurance salesman who is surrounded by death. Do you think he got into life insurance simply because he could see how people were going to die, or was it just a coincidence? Another Darren Morgan written episode. It's very funny but also very touching. There are great moments between Clyde Bruckman and Scully, and the ending is pretty heartfelt. We also have the introduction of Quagmire, which I definitely cannot forget. There's a lot I could say about the episode, but honestly, just go and watch it.
We end up in bed together. I'm sorry.
At number 1, for today at least, until I change my mind tomorrow, we have Jose Chung's From Outer Space. Another Darren Morgan written episode, and I don't know what it is, I just really like his work. It's funny because when I was younger, I really wasn't a fan of the episode, but as I got older, I grew to love it more and more. The episode is about a couple teens that are abducted by aliens, and then all the craziness that ensues afterwards. You get multiple perspectives from various characters, and I mean characters, because they're all very eccentric. The entire thing is just chaos from beginning to end, from gags like mocking the alien autopsy from 1995, or cameos from stars like Jesse Ventura and Alex Trebek, two very different people. It's really hard to put into words what this episode is, you really just need to experience it. You can sit there and pick out reference after reference, and I'm sure everyone that watches it has their favorite moment. One of mine would be the recollection of Mulder sitting at the diner, eating slice after slice of sweet potato pie, and asking the most nonsensical questions to the poor guy that's serving him. All in all, Jose Chung is a fantastic episode, and well deserving of the number 1 spot.
Yeah, that's a bleeping dead alien body if I ever bleeping saw one.
And there we have it. Every season 3 episode ranked from worst to best. At least how I see it anyways. I would love to know how you would rank them yourself, so tell me down in the comments. Anyways, that's all for today. Thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot to me, and stay spooky.